Back, everybody. Joining us on stage are the Senate District 9 candidates. We have Republican Tollison and Democrat Cristen Hemmins. And we will do 3 minutes to introduce yourself and tell us why you are running. We'll start with Ms. Hemmins.
Thanks, Stephanie. I'm Cristen Hemmins, and I am a lifelong Mississippian. From growing up in Jackson to spending time in my parents' hometowns in the Delta, to running my business here in Oxford and raising our family for the last 22 years, my Mississippi roots are far-reaching. My dad was even Archie Manning's offensive guard on the 68 through 71 football team, so I was learning hotty-toddy as soon as I could talk. My mom has taught kindergarten in Jackson for 40 years, and I grew up going to public schools in Jackson and finished my education with a master's degree in Southern Studies right here in Oxford. When I moved to Oxford 22 years ago, I knew I was home. My husband Andy and I have 3 kids who dance, play soccer, love math and science, and attend Oxford Public Schools. And we all live in an old farmhouse just on the edge of town north of here. Today, I'm here as a mom, a small business owner, and an everyday member of our community who's very concerned with our district leaders' recent votes against the best interests of our schools and communities. I'm running because it's time for our schools, teachers, parents, and children to have a state senator who will stand up for them in our state capitol. We need leaders who care about you and your families and who have the courage to do what's right. After years of ranking last in every important quality of life category, the politicians we keep sending to Jackson clearly just aren't getting the job done. Like Jay, I'm fed up with being 50th, and it's time for a change. Education is the key to better jobs, better communities, and a better quality of life for all Mississippians. As your District 9 Senator, I'll work every day to protect and improve our schools, not hurt them, and that's why I'm running. Thank you.
Mr. Tollison.
Well, I've got some great news. And this is from the Mississippi Department of Education website, which anybody can draw down. It says, the title is, Mississippi leads the nation for 4th grade gains on the National Assessment of Educational Progress. And what is NAEP? NAEP is the nation's report card. We're leading the nation, folks, in 4th grade reading and math. We should be celebrating, and all credit is due to the students, the teachers, and administrators and parents who made that happen. It is really an accomplishment that we did that. And I hope that you will read this and understand how important it is. We are making progress. And the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. This is a small step. It's in the right direction, and it's something that we should really celebrate. I started this journey in politics in 1995, and I'll continue it today. I'm passionate about education. And maybe you agree with the things I'm doing, but I am still concerned to make sure that we do the best for our children and give them the opportunity to have a great education, regardless of zip code, regardless of race, regardless of their parents' salary. We have great schools here in Oxford and Lafayette County, but in many parts of our state, we don't. And I've been able to, in my position as chairman of the Senate Education Committee, to change that and invest in places that they don't necessarily have the support that we have in our community. And for those 20 years, I have supported funding for education every time. And you can go back even to 2014, if you'd like to know, House Bill 1476, the amendment to number 2, committee amendment to propose 1, Tollison, yay, on a bill to increase by $60 million, yay. And there was a 1 vote difference on that. In 2015, just this past year, Amendment number 1 proposed to House Bill 1536. Both of these are appropriation bills, mind you. The only way you can increase funding for K-12 education is through an appropriation, not a constitutional amendment. Appropriation that goes through the Senate appropriation bill. And I voted for that one. Additionally, $25 million. If the measure of the candidate is how much funding they have voted for K-12 education during my time, it's been $1 billion. $1 billion has increased from 1996 to 2015. I'm proud of that. And additionally, I'm proud of the fact that teacher salary has increased from about $27,000 average to about $43,000 today, and maybe actually more.
All right, we'll go in reverse order this time. And once again, there's 3 minutes. It's without a doubt, education is the hot topic, particularly Initiative 42. Tell us your stance on 42.
Well, as I've said, my record, I've consistently fought for funding for education, K-12. And I think that the issue becomes, what does the amendment do? And I think there are causes of great concern, of unintended consequences. I have this quote of Lyndon Johnson in my desk in the Senate, and it says this. Lyndon Johnson was he was a leader of the Senate in the U.S. Senate, and here's what his quote was when he reviewed legislation. "You do not examine legislation in the light of the benefits it will convey if properly administered, but in the light of the wrongs it would do and the harms it would cause if improperly administered." I believe there is cause for great concern of unintended consequences, especially in this community, of really a double whammy. Because we do have our schools here, and we want to increase funding. I want to, and I'm fighting for it. I'm down there in the meetings where that's happening. You can ask anyone at the Capitol if Gray Tollison is fighting for increased funding for K-12. But we also have this thing called the University of Mississippi that has a $500 million impact, that receives $83 million in state money, and it's actually steady declining. We've got to be mindful of this. That is the jewel of this community. We have the North Mississippi Regional Center that brings in millions in Medicaid dollars, and the hospital and the healthcare community. We have the $60 million that goes to our retirees in this community. There's a lot of the budget that comes into Lafayette County that you need to be mindful of, and we can't just look at things in silos. We have to put all the budget on the table and say, okay, how can we parcel this up? It is unfortunate that we went through a recession back in 08, 09, where our budget dropped about $700 million, just like people's income, just like your mortgage in certain places went on. It was a tough time, but we came out of that. We ended the budget gimmicks of one-time money, and now we are able to fund recurring revenue with recurring expenses. You know, in my household, you live within your means. You don't write checks you can't cash. And I don't think the state of Mississippi needs to do that as well. So we need to be mindful of living within our means. We do have a limited budget in this state. We're a poor state. We're the poorest state in the country. We can't get beyond that, but we need to be smart and prescriptive in how we spend our education money. And I think these NAEP gains show that we were prescriptive. One, we adopted the college and career ready standards, which I supported and fought for tooth and nail to make sure we maintain that, which was adopted in 2010. And then additionally, we did the third grade literacy promotion act to put an emphasis on reading in the early grades. And it's not just third grade, it's all the way back to pre-K.
I also saw the NAEP reports today, and I applaud our students and our educators for managing to make these advances even while suffering crisis mode of underfunding. Here in Senate District 9, which is all of Lafayette County and about 1/3 of Panola County, and includes 4 school districts, those school districts have had to make do with over $40 million less than they needed. That's just for C-level adequate funding. And that's great if I'm pleased and proud that we've been able to advance our test scores, but we're still not giving our kids in our schools just the simple basics of what they need to get by. And I think that's shameful, and we can do better. As to 42, I'm a proud supporter of 42. As soon as I heard about the ballot initiative, I think it was almost 2 years ago, I called up my mom's college roommate, Patsy Brumfeld, and said, I want to help get signatures. And I helped get signatures. I was one of those Mississippians who worked hard because I'm fed up with being 50th, and clearly leaving it up to our legislators to decide when they should follow their own law and adequately fund our schools is not cutting it, because they've only done so twice in 18 years. we need a mandate and we need redress if they refuse to follow their own law. The day I decided to run for Senate was the day I saw Senator Tollison on the Senate floor. I was watching it live stream as he argued and led the charge for 42A. I was insulted as a citizen and really appalled that the democratic process was being treated in such a way. I'm sure you've all seen this ballot. It's ridiculously confusing. I'm sure if they could have put it in Russian, they would have, because that's the one step we're missing in making it almost so difficult to understand. Our schools are the key to our communities, and without strong schools, we don't have vibrant communities. And in Oxford, we're so fortunate that we have the tax base to fill the gaps in funding, but I want to make sure all the kids in Mississippi have access to a quality public school, and mandating adequate funding is really the only way we can do that. If we don't pass 42, we're with the status quo. Our legislators still have the ability to ignore their own law, and I fear that they'll continue to do so. So we have to pass 42 so that there's a way we can ensure that they will follow the law. And secondarily, we need to make sure we elect representatives who will mandate and go for adequate funding outside of 42 if it doesn't pass, because the bar is so high now.
Right. Is there anything that your opponent said that you would want to refute or expand upon in 3 minutes?
How about agree upon? I'll
Mine
agree
too.
about the ballot, but you know what? I wasn't there when that ballot was drafted, but it is confusing and it is what it is. That's the Secretary of State at the time, which would have been in 1994, so you figure out who that might have been. Anyway, I do want to make this point too, and this is something that has gotten lost in the conversation, is about equity. I was in the Senate when we voted to pass MAP. I overrode the governor that passed about 2 votes, whom it was passed by 2 Republicans who have now since deceased, then Senator Alan Nunley and Senator Jim Beam from Lamar County. It's about equity, and the whole point of MAP is all schools aren't as wealthy as Oxford. Oxford's assessed valuation, the value of all our property, has gone from $90 million in 1996 to $400 million today. It's probably a little more now. Little North Bolivar over in Bolivar County is $10 million. The point of this MAP is to do a sliding scale. North Bolivar should get more state money and Oxford get less. Now, Rutgers, and Sid Salter wrote about this. Rutgers says Mississippi gets a B for maintenance of effort based on how much money we have. As a matter of fact, if you look at the public education finances from the U.S. Census Bureau, you can get this online, 2013, and I'll tell you, Table 12. Look at Table 12. Based on our per capita income as a state, which we're last, Mississippi and our state funding, our maintenance of effort state funding, we're number 19. We're number 19. It's right here in black and white. Everybody can have their own opinion, but you can only have one set of facts here. And the set of facts is Mississippi state funding is pretty good right there based on per capita income. And where we're not doing at the same level is local sources. So that's an issue that I wish people would look at where we're in terms of the funding. And even on a dollar-to-dollar figure, which surprised me, we're 41st. We spend more money per pupil from the state than Colorado, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Nebraska, Utah, Texas, Florida, South Dakota, Arizona, D.C., which I think to sit there and say we're 50th, the facts don't bear that out in terms of where the state is giving money. The question becomes the equity. Now, here's the thing about equity. Oxford, if you rank our school districts, we have 144 school districts. We're 6th in terms of how wealthy we are. Our wealth is $100,000 per student. The rent is $15,000. What's going to happen is you're going to squeeze this down and create more equity, but the Oxfords of the world will get less state money and Durant's will get more. And that's what Rutgers is saying we need to do, and that's the conversation that needs to be talked about.
Ms. Hemmins.
Continuing on that topic Senator Tollison was talking about, the reason some districts need more than others, and the reason it's problematic that Mississippi is spending so little in comparison to other states in the nation, is that we're the poorest state in the nation. When you have a child that's born into poverty, it takes more money to bring them up to speed with the child that's not born into poverty. So the fact that we are 47th in spending on our kids in schools is exceptionally problematic when added to the fact that we have the highest rates of infant mortality and the highest rates of child poverty in the nation. I wanted to respond to Senator Tollison's comment about teacher salaries earlier. We did raise teacher salaries last year, but our teachers' salaries here in Mississippi are still the lowest of any state around us. A teacher in Mississippi can go to any state on any of our borders and get $5,000 to $9,000 more a year in salary. And what that means is the brightest teachers oftentimes leave the state, as do some of our brightest children. And we need to fix that. I've heard a lot of our current leaders crow about the increases in funding, and they're so proud of how much money they've given our schools recently in comparison to other years. Well, that's all great, but it's like if you're paying your mortgage and it's a $1,000 mortgage and you've been paying $500 every month, and suddenly you're going to pay $700 and expect your landlord to be really proud of you for paying that $700 when really you had to have been paying $1,000 every month. So crow all you will about the increase in funding, but we're still not reaching adequate, and that's shameful. And Senator Tollison has mentioned a couple of times his seniority. Obviously, he's been representing this district for 19 years now, and I want to make sure everybody remembers that he gained that seniority on the back of my party. We worked hard to get him elected, and then he switched parties on us the day after, and I've not forgotten that. We need a senator who will do what they say they're going to do and vote the way the voters who elect that person expects them to vote. That did not happen this last time around, and this district deserves a representative that they can count on. As a mom, I wanted to return to 42. As a mom of 3 kids, I support 42 because I understand how critical adequate support and funding is to successful learning. And as a small business owner, I support 42 because I understand that a community is only as good as its public school. And as a senator, I will fight to implement full funding because I understand that my top priority is to do what's best for District 9 families above all else, and that means proposing and voting for legislation that helps our schools be the best they can be. Thank you.
On to another question. What else is important to this district that you want to handle while you're at the Capitol in 2 minutes?
Well, I hate to harp on one subject, but really it all comes back to education. The Senate district it covers a wide range because we've got Oxford and Lafayette County and Panola County as well. I don't want to forget Panola County, which has been split into 3 different Senate districts, and obviously they've never voted for Senator Tollison before because that was not part of the district until it was all gerrymandered and redistricted after he switched parties. I think the key to making sure that all of our communities in Mississippi have strong economies and strong families is making sure that our kids have access to quality public schools. I've heard so many stories about schools having to make do with poor buildings, buses breaking down, children having to ride on the neighboring district's buses and waiting for an hour at school for their bus route to finish so then they can get the ride home. Teachers, I have friends in Holly Springs who have to buy their own paper or who are on Facebook asking, how can my kids write this report on Rome without access to the internet or encyclopedias or any books in my library? And these are things that could be fixed by making sure that we have adequate funding for our schools. So that's an issue I think we need that's just of dire consequence to our county and our state as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's important to recognize that our county has grown a lot in the past 25 years. We're the 14th largest county in the state. It's becoming more and more important to know what's going on at the Capitol and have an input down there. We have a $6 billion budget, and as I said, a lot of state money comes into this community. And the decisions that are made down there is important to us and has an impact on us. I was proud that we were able to get $3 million to help the city and the county expand West Oxford Loop, which is very much needed, especially for parents that have children that play at FNC Park. That's going to help them and get to that area, and I hope the city and county continue to expand that. We're a growing community. We've got a lot of issues related to that, and infrastructure is going to be a big issue going forward. And we provided $200 million also to replace bridges around the state. That's for jobs, economic development. But this is becoming a hub. I want, not only is it important to bring in the Yokohamas and the Nissans and the Toyotas, but continue to nurture the FNCs of the world. We've got a lot of opportunities with our School of Pharmacy at Ole Miss, and I'm excited about, I would assume, the presumed chancellor with his computer science background. I think that's a great opportunity to shore up, and we're about to embark the university on a $138 million science building. So there's some exciting things happening, but we need to know that the legislature, somebody who has an effective voice and can work with people. I've been able to do that. I work with Republican, Democrats, and I've done that all along. I was appointed as lieutenant governor at the time, was a Republican, appointed me to Judge B committee. So I've been shown that I can work with anyone. I'm not the messenger, I'm carrying the message. And there are doers and talkers down at the Capitol, and I'd like to think I'm a doer to get things done.
Once again, in a 2-minute talk, is there anything your opponent said that you want to agree, disagree, or expand on? Ms. Hemmins?
I'd like to agree with Senator Tollison that obviously the West Oxford Loop expansion is very important and needed. That's great. We need to finish moving on that project. I know that I make a ton of trips out to FNC myself, and it'd be great to have a shortcut. And obviously the university is critical to this district. I'd like to return to the 42 issue and the threats that have been made against many different divisions around the state about cuts in funding. People like to bring up the university when they're talking about funding 42, and maybe there'll be cuts to the university or the community colleges, but that's all not true. The 42 ballot initiative made it clear that this was to be funded with 25% of budget surplus and with a gradual phase-in, so there's no need to ever do any cuts, and I want to reinforce that because I fear that some of the leaders against 42 are using scare tactics to turn different parts of workers, the government workers in other areas, and that to me is a terrible thing they're doing, because we should all be pulling together and not making some people fear that they're going to have to make cuts to the state hospital, for example, or the MNRC, for example, the regional center, for example. 42 can be phased in without making cuts to these other parts of the government. And so I think it's important we remember that. I'd also like to mention that I'm really proud as a candidate to have the backing of the Mississippi Association of Educators. They had a survey that I did, a candidate survey, and they chose to endorse me over Senator Tollison, and since he's chair of the Senate Education Committee, that means a lot to me. The fact that the educators saw where I stood on those issues and where Senator Tollison has voted, and instead chose to back me. Thank you.
That's interesting, because I never got that survey, but I guess that says a lot. Let me speak about the 42. I think when the petitions were signed, what I was told and what I heard, this is going to fully fund education by signing this and putting this law. That's not going to happen. And let me say something that Jeff Pender wrote in Sunday's paper. He said, proponents of 42 have charitably said they'd give lawmakers up to 7 years to fully fund education using as little as 25% of revenue growth each year. But the legislature has for the last 3 years put more than 25%, closer to 30% of new revenue into public education. So if the legislature is already doing what they want, why this now? Good question. As a matter of fact, the last 4 years, there's been $717 million in new revenue. 40% of that, or $288 million, has gone into K-12 education. 55%, or $394 million, has gone into all levels of education, community colleges and things like that. Here's the two facts that are important. The proposed amendment found in 42 contains no reference to funding. It doesn't mention MAP or any other language that would limit 201 to spending decisions should it pass. And it also deletes every reference to the legislature. This is one thing. This is that giving power to a judge. It's a power play. I mean, you sit there and say, I'm going to tell you how it's going to work out. If this passes, what will happen is you'll have 2 years of litigation determining the constitutionality, and there will be a freeze on every funding of anything. So if I want to increase funding for pre-K, which we would, for the first time ever, $3 million for pre-K, it won't happen because this is going to put us in a flux, in limbo, basically for the next 2 years. And we'll be like the Ayers decision in higher ed, 30 years of litigation. I hope that's not the case, but people are saying, what if? And as I said, unintended consequences when it is improperly administered is something to be mindful of. I used to work for Senator Stennis, and Senator Stennis had on his desk, look ahead. It's my job as a legislator to look ahead and say, what impact would this have on our state? And I think we need to be mindful of what this might have on and see what, if these issues happen and the struggle you're about to have between the judiciary and the legislature.
All right, I'm going to switch this up a little bit. Instead of a 2-minute closing, we're going to do a 4-minute closing. So, in closing, please summarize any other thoughts you have on any topic, why we should vote for you November 3rd. Mr. Tollison, your first.
Well, I think I'll go back where I started. When I got into this business, as my wife says, who has been provided wisdom and support through this, Amanda, and my father, who's here, the 78-year-old sage. I've got into this business. She calls me the accidental politician, and she's probably right. I'm more about policy over politics. I don't do this well, but I am passionate about education. And I am committed to making improvements in this state. We have great schools. We can improve. We've got one good thing we have here, which helps our pocketbooks. Our parents will send their kids to college, is AP classes. We offer a lot. My daughter Laurel, I think, is taking about, 5 or 6 right now? 6. She's taking 6 AP classes. If she scores a 3 or higher, she'll get college credit. That's less money that Dad has to pay for college, which is good. So, but what I'm saying is there are a lot of schools that don't offer that. We need to offer that. We're working a lot on the bottom 25% with the reading. 90% of people who were not literate or could not read on grade level in 3rd grade are high school dropouts. 90%. And so if we improve in the early grades, and that's what I go back to putting state money into early education. We're doing that. For the first time ever, the state of Mississippi put $3 million. I'd like to double it up next year. Provide more. We have these early learning collaboratives in 11 places across the state that are making huge gains with those young people. They're doing developmental screening with them to determine if they have special needs. They're doing it early. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. There are a lot of things I want to continue working on. I reach out to people at our School of Education, Dean Rock, who I worked with on the teacher ed bill, Angela Rutherford on literacy. University of Mississippi is a big part of our education reform effort. I would like to continue that. I want to work on teacher training. There's some things we need to do. I want to look at differentiated pay for teachers. What that is, essentially paying teachers more who show that they're doing, or they're more do that class. Like an example, going back to Holmes County, where you can't hire a good math teacher, pay them more to teach in Holmes County. They may, and everybody wants to teach in Oxford or Lafayette County. So there's a lot of things that we're looking to improve on and build on these Nate gains. The other thing I worked to pass was $1.3 million. And that's another thing about MAP. That's not the only money that goes to education. We have $155 million off the books of MAEP that goes to national board certification. As I said, ACT, for every junior to take the ACT free for once, which is important. There's a lot of things. If you include that and you debit that against MAEP, you're only $45 million from reducing the deficit. And that's just one of the quirks of our budget. And quite frankly, there may be some way to figure that out to include that. The problem is this, though. You have board certification as an example. The state gives $24 million to board certified teachers. That is a $6,000 supplement they get to go through a process. It goes directly to the school district. If we give that through MAEP, Oxford's going to be shortchanged. They have, 30 or 40 board certified teachers. So say you have 40 times 6, that's $240,000. If we put the $24 million in MAEP, they're not going to get $240,000. It's going to hurt the good districts, and that's going to have an impact. There's all these scenarios out there that might, as I said, unintended consequences that may occur as a result of that. And let me finish. If this is closing, I would appreciate your vote on Tuesday, November 3rd, next week. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Hemmins.
I'd like to quickly respond to just a couple of things. Senator Tollison talked about the different special projects that are not part of the MAEP. Well, that has to be the case because for most of the districts in Mississippi, the MAEP doesn't even cover teacher salaries, much less fixing a leaky roof or buying up-to-date textbooks. So, for example, we had the 3rd grade reading gate, which was possibly a good idea and did help improve, get some kids on the better reading level, but at the same time, it wasn't adequately funded. So the children they had the bar raised on them, and yet they weren't given enough reading teachers and reading help to help actually achieve the raised bar and achieve the levels that were required. The one judge in Jackson and Hinds County thing I have to return to. I'm sure many of you saw last week that about 40 law school professors and lawyers from around the state issued an opinion on that scare tactic that we keep hearing, that if 42 passes, one judge in Hinds County will be able to take control of the entire budget and decide everything for our schools and change curriculum and all this crazy, ridiculous stuff. And all of these law school professors and lawyers looked into it and said that that's simply not true. Judge Carlson, who's a retired Supreme Court Justice, I had breakfast with him this morning at 6 a.m. at the Rotary Club in Batesville, and he also you've probably seen a commercial on television. Judge Carlson says that that's just simply not true. So I'd like to, make sure everybody realizes that that's just yet another scare tactic. And of course, we all heard when Bubba Carpenter trotted out, our state rep, about the fact that it's one judge in Hinds County it's a race baiting thing as well. We know that people are meant to think that it's a black judge who's going to take money from your white school and give it to the black schools, and I think that that's despicable. And to hear Senator Tollison yet again talk about one judge in Jackson is very disappointing to me. In closing, I'd like to say Senator Tollison likes to talk about his seniority and his leadership, but at this point, where is his seniority taking us? So far, it's taken us down a road where our Senate District 9 schools are in a $42 million hole, and we have no way of knowing where he stands on a lot of issues that are important to Senate District 9. I've talked to people on the school board who say that they live in fear of what's going to happen in the next session. What sort of voucher bills are going to pass this time? What sort of charter school bills? Are they going to expand charter schools to all C districts in Mississippi? I mean, that's the next step. Once you open the door to privatization and taking money from our public school systems and putting it into the pockets of people who are out to make money off of our children, you're going down a very dangerous road. The massive disregard shown for our teachers, our teaching assistants, and children during the 2015 legislative session told me one thing. If we want to build a state where communities thrive and kids succeed, we must elect new leadership on November 3rd. I'd also, before I say my final closing, I'd like to thank the over 500 individuals who've donated to my campaign. I've gotten no money from special interest group unless you call the Mississippi Association of Educators a special interest group. They're the only ones. All of the money I've raised, which is about $90,000 on my own, has been raised from individual contributions. And those are the people that I will be beholden to. I will not be beholden to the Koch brothers or payday lenders or charter school PACs, which is where my opponent has gotten his money. I'd also like to thank the 86 volunteers who've been writing thousands of postcards for me, handwritten postcards, who've been phone banking for me, who've been knocking on doors for me. We've knocked on thousands of doors in Lafayette and Pontotoc County. We've had some great conversations with people all over the place, and I've really enjoyed this whole process, and I'd really like if you consider voting for me. I think we need to take a stand for our schools and defend our public schools, and I hope you'll vote for me, Cristen Hemmins, on Tuesday. Thank you.
Let's give them both a hand. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you, everybody, for being here.